Hey, what's up, guys? Today we've got a new little piece for you. This is a new piece I happened to find out there. Well, believe it or not, it's one of the best I've come across. I found it quite interesting, so I picked it up to bring it here for you. And before we start the video, if you could leave a like down below and also subscribe to the channel, that would help a lot. Oh, and don't forget to leave your comment as well. That will support the channel a lot. Before starting, I wish you all a pre-Merry Christmas. But stopping with the delay, let's get to the focus. Our story revolves around a guy, well, he was a guy, let's say, who carried the weight of humanity. In this world, a certain thing appeared that, let's say, sent him to another dimension, where he participated in bizarre tournaments. But if you were eliminated in this tournament, you would end up becoming a spectator. Of course, for extras, they become spectators, but for our hero, Ming Yang, he kind of manages to break this rule. Because when he's eliminated, he can somehow turn back time, going back to the past. At that moment, he managed to create several versions of himself, versions where he failed, or versions where he managed to overcome that problematic challenge he had just encountered. But in the end, he reaches a point of death. Even if he has to step over his own corpse, he will not give up, as he wants to bring out the best final version. He also wants to create a better life for humanity, even if just a little. Since Ming Yang has the sole objective of achieving the best destiny for a player. But our story begins with the system appearing, saying that he was the best player, but had died. Died as soon as he woke up again in this world. He ends up wondering how that happened, since the only thing he remembers is that he was almost dying, lying on the ground, completely exhausted. He wondered what was happening to him. Also, dying. He said, why did this have to happen to him? He didn't want to accept that unfair ending. He just wanted to have a better destiny. But the system said the new world was starting now. Truly awakening, he tries to understand some things. As our protagonist was basically Su-ming, a university student who was just a video editor for horror films. Well, he ends up having some kind of nightmares with these videos he keeps making. At this moment, rubbing his eyes in front of him, we can see an ability that questions what was happening to some, as he ends up saying he was fine. The reason maybe was that he had stayed up quite late, but okay. This woman here ends up saying she didn't want to talk much to our protagonist. Instead, a certain company saw a person to fetch our protagonist to participate in a new, very realistic game. Now, holding that letter in his hands, he wonders what kind of game this realistic game was. At that moment, when he opens the letter, he sees there the details of the game. This is the world of arenas, where health points matter, with multiplayer matches. There are limits to everything. So the objective was basically a battle royale, as the goal was to put several players in an arena to find out which one was the best, if he is the best. This letter questions whether he basically wanted to participate. After reading it, he ends up thinking, no, he shouldn't participate in this. The woman, on the other hand, was kind of trying to convince our protagonist to reconsider. After saying all this, he gets up, saying he's no longer interested and will leave. As he leaves, the girl says that something will really happen to him, as it will be a completely different path if he leaves. Since this was his choice, she believes he will return soon, very soon. To him, it was absurd. He even thought it was a product placement announcement that required a personal meeting. But in the end, he realized it was just a waste of time. Then he leaves the place where he was, and at that moment, our hero ends up leaving. Since tonight was Senu's birthday, and since he had nothing else to do, it was better to go there early. However, at the moment he thinks about doing this thing, that system thing appears again in his mind. After appearing in his mind again, Sum begins to hear that sound again, as since the previous night, he had been faintly hearing that sound in his mind. It was as if something was basically reminding him to do something. After all this happens, he keeps saying that maybe it was all a prank or something from some company. And if it was a prank, it was a bad prank. He didn't like it. However, again, upon leaving, the system says now it's a last-minute update, but he completely ignores it. As for our hero, within a car, he starts recalling some things. In this world, a certain event was just beginning where people were essentially getting a second heart. In the future, having two hearts would basically allow one to extend their life to a much longer and happier one. The taxi driver, on the other hand, mentioned that this thing was basically in its early stages where, well, trying to do it alone at home could lead to something bad happening to you. The double heart surgery, these news stories were quite dangerous to be shared around the world. The heart essentially corresponds to a human's life. This is the rule of biological evolution in nature, especially for humans, as they are naturally equipped with one heart. But imagine having two hearts. They would beat more, and you'd live longer. It might even be relatively easy to place a second heart. You'd just need to take your buddy's heart. However, if this were to develop further, society would face a huge problem. This would result in the illegal buying and selling of organs, with people going crazy to obtain one. But well, this issue needed to be resolved in the future, as it wasn't a priority for him at the moment. Now, he was going to visit his classmate. As soon as he entered, she called out to Suming, her classmate, and thanked him for coming to her birthday party. Yet at that moment, he noticed something surprising. There was no one else in her house. He thought maybe he was the first to arrive, but he then caught a scent. He wondered if she had lit incense, but there was already an answer to this. A friend of hers was in the kitchen preparing a meal. At that moment, she appeared, encouraging Shu to stay there and chat with our hero, as she didn't have much time to talk. They ended up continuing their conversation. Each took a spot in the living room, and at this moment, our protagonist revealed to us that Shu, in school, was one of the most beautiful girls. Rumor had it that she was in love with our hero. And well, if it were him, he wouldn't still be single. Out of nowhere, she asked what Suming would be doing after finishing school, university. Knowing this, he only said that he didn't have any specific plans. After university, maybe he'd look for some type of work. However, she ended up asking him to consider joining the same psychology university as her. Before this was all planned, he had researched other professions he might pursue. During his research, he discovered that many people warned against entering the mercenary profession or certain others. However, for some reason, no one spoke ill of psychology. So, he chose this profession to maybe enter quickly. At that moment, our protagonist asked the same question. What would she be doing after graduation? She only mentioned basic things, visiting the ocean or several places around the world, as she had never seen the sea. So it would be good to visit it at least once in her life. After that, she wanted to start a company. Well, a button sewing business. If that didn't work out, she wanted to be a journalist, searching for and exposing things causing chaos in the world, living life to the fullest. But she no longer wanted to talk about this topic. She wanted to change the subject and asked him to eat some bread. Without understanding anything, he grabbed the bread. Maybe it was bread that Jeb had needed. At that moment, he brought the bread close to his mouth and noticed a smell, but he ignored it and ate it anyway. As he chewed the bread, he suddenly felt dizzy, falling to the ground. He wondered what Shu had done to him. She apologized, and after all this, even said she liked him. Well, if she liked him, she should just confess. But our protagonist only said he felt weak, maybe because he had eaten bread with a bad smell. Then she told him she liked him a lot and wanted him to stay with her forever. At that moment, she sprayed something in his face, making him lose consciousness. When he woke up, he found her on top of him. At this moment, she was also holding a knife. But minutes later, the system appeared, announcing to us that the global game had officially started. For some reason, though, our protagonist lasted 0.0 seconds in this game, as he didn't even see the destructive entrance into this world. Out of 10 billion players, only one did not participate. This was our Ching. Due to an unknown error, the game would be paused and resumed later. The system told us, "You failed. Do you want to restart in a completely different system?" He muttered, "Did I die?" This place looked like a palace, but with some lights. Minutes later, he remembered being attacked by Shu. But as this was a voice game, maybe it was also a point where he was truly saved. Now, he was dragged to this entirely different place. Upon waking up, the system appeared, asking where he wished to be reborn. At a checkpoint or elsewhere? Seeing this, he was surprised to see there were save points. At that moment, he remembered hearing that system voice in his mind before. Maybe that was when his game was saved. So, he chose to return to the night when he was at her house. He wondered if selecting that point would really let him go back in time. Choosing it, the system pulled him forward. When he was pulled, he woke up again. Now awake, he saw that he truly returned. In front of him, he noticed a mission board. One mission stated that he had chosen the system's mechanism. Now, he needed to find clues and adjust actions to make a different ending. Another mission mentioned the protagonist needed to survive knowing that he was still in the initial lobby. He knew he needed to endure a bit because he hadn't even started yet, as there were still 10 billion human players who would participate in the same event as him. At this point, he now thinks about how he had gone through some hardships in his previous life. But now, he kind of has the option to maybe change something or not. He can only accept reality. But then the girl from before appears by his side and asks if he was thinking about something. However, she quickly tells our hero to go ahead and eat that bread. But he already knew that if he ate the bread, he would die. So, he said he would do something there first, and after going to the bathroom and coming back, he could take action. Getting up, he starts thinking that she had put something in that bread, and also in Shan's series, there was that El Play d'An. That friend of hers was also in the kitchen, so he needed to create a plan to escape. He couldn't simply go out through the front door, or else the two would chase him, and his end would be pretty much the same as in his previous life. Thinking about what he could do, he ended up finding something. At this moment, the system appears, saying that the thing in front of him belonged to a deputy director of the XZU Academy of Sciences. Once again, the system explains to us that she was the principal researcher of the Double Heart Project, better known as our Liana. After discovering this, the system advances by 20%. However, he ends up smelling this thing, but at that moment, he detects a slightly different scent. The system then appears, saying that there was something there that, let's say, basically preserves corpses of anything. At this moment, he now wonders why Shan has that kind of thing in her house. She is not trained in chemistry or biology, but he thinks this belonged to Liana. After uncovering some good things, our protagonist then goes to the bathroom. In the bathroom, he now locks the door. Sitting on top of the toilet, he considers jumping out of the window, but then he thinks he shouldn't do that, as Shan lives on the second floor, and it wouldn't end well for him. But at the moment he thinks of doing this, he sees some things behind him that catch his attention. At this moment, he goes down and notices a slightly hollow tile in front of him, where he finds an anesthetic. Additionally, he finds a letter along with the anesthetic. Picking up that thing, he realizes that Shan was basically undergoing treatments that would, well, change her life a bit. But why was she doing these kinds of exams? It was because she was already on the brink of death, so she ended up opting for something else. Looking at this, he realizes it belonged to Shan, but this whole story confuses our hero. However, he ends up remembering that Shan had a terminal illness, but to prolong her life, she approached Liana, hoping to undergo the double heart surgery. However, although this surgery is quite dangerous, someone in her situation who could die at any moment ends up embracing anything that would let them live a little longer. But there's that catch. For someone to have that double heart, they basically need another heart. But who was chosen to have their heart taken? Our protagonist. He wasn't lucky, but also had the misfortune of having her hunting him down. Yet again, he feels that scent. But now it's closer. He sees it's not a good thing. However, the door ends up opening. They tell him not to go too far since he already discovered many things. But to stop him from revealing more, they tell him there's a room in the basement where they'll do the surgery. At this moment, knowing that he was sedated and couldn't do anything anymore, it was just a matter of taking him down there. I don't know how our protagonist ended up in this situation, but he was taken downstairs and once again met his end at the hands of the two. However, again, the system gave him a choice. The protagonist managed to go back a little in time. This small leap back in time made him realize he had finally returned. In front of him, he observes the taxi driver asking where he would go. He says he would go home, but on his cell phone, that girl wonders if he is really coming to her house because they had an appointment to go, but nothing. He goes home that Manet died today at home now, sleeping in his bed. He realizes that, right? He managed to make a salvation there before, that was luck. Because if he had to save inside that girl's house from his classmate, he would die again too. Our protagonist even kind of asked his classmates, and by chance they end up receiving news or a call so that they could be going to his birthday, but no one received, knowing it was a trap. He should stay here, but at this moment he wonders if this is a game, where is that system screen? What he asked ended up being realized in front of him. Appears the system screen there. It showed his level disappearing. It was level 1 there. It showed other basic things, his state, but now he doesn't have time to be doing this here. No, he now prefers to be sleeping because he still has another day. But the moment he thought about sleeping, his cell phone starts ringing. And guess who it was? It was that one from before. She wondered what she did to him. For him not having gone to her birthday, that she even prepared several good things for him to be eating or enjoying. But he didn't need to worry. Okay, that she was a true friend. And the true friend that she even decided to go to his house, and now she even asked him to open his house door because she was there. And so when he goes to the door, he sees her face at the door. He even gets a fright to see her there in front of him. But at this moment, then here, now he has no more where he can be escaping. Well, if he escapes, he will be basically being chased by her until the end. So he has no more choice, no more until he prepared everything. At this moment, he opens the door and sees her shameless face there. Now he asks her to come in. So coming in, she called him Ming and wonders what happened since he ended up making her wait a lot for him. So she wanted something to compensate him. He apologizes and says he was preparing a meal for her. So he ends up asking her to come in and taste it in front of this. Now she is surprised to see that the same thing he ended up preparing is the same thing she prepared for our Ming there at her house, knowing that it was good to taste this here. Now she ends up kind of saying that none of them was to her liking. And obviously at her house, she prepared something Ming's favorite. So Ming ends up wondering if she wouldn't eat well. She, knowing that she couldn't refuse, ends up kind of saying that Ming was offering her a good meal, so she can't refuse something like this. So drinking, she starts to realize that Ming was looking a lot in her direction for this. She wonders what happened. So for this answer, has another. He says that with both hands busy holding this cup. How would she be holding that splay that is with all certainty under her skirt as he talks about this splay? She ends up unintentionally letting that cup of coffee fall on the floor. But knowing this, she would take off the splay right away. But before she can take off the splay, our protagonist, first now with a knife in hand, he ends up making some small threats. Nothing too much in this situation. She asks Ming not to do anything he was intending to do since he doesn't know anything, so just let her go away. At this moment, she ends up kind of feeling her strength going away. However, our protagonist wonders where was the other falling almost asleep. She wonders what was happening to Ming because really she was the only one left in the family. However, our protagonist ended up kind of saying there before that he ended up doing a research. Well, in this research, he ended up asking his colleagues if by chance they received this invitation letter for her birthday party. But no one received this, and for this she starts to invent. I don't know, some excuses. Well, her excuses I don't know are so acceptable, but knowing that no excuse will lead to anything, so she ends up kind of saying that she likes him. But at this moment, what she says about this our hero, and he ends up passing the Tramontina on her, and because of that, the system appears saying that he ended up gaining 20 experience points for having killed that one. At this moment, he realizes he did something he can no longer take back. Without knowing what was happening at the door, someone ends up knocking, calling for Porin and asking what was going on. He knew there was still one more missing, so from her skirt, he ends up pulling out that play. Now that he took it out, we observe from the outside her knocking on the door, still calling for Shan and asking what happened. But the door suddenly ends up opening, and multiplay ends up being splashed on her face. After receiving that splash of display on her face, she wonders why he did that to her. The answer? Clearly, I don't know. But he knows that the two were planning something against our protagonist. Finally, our protagonist went up to the thin agent. He doesn't let her fall, holding her there in his school cap. Because it's a last-minute attack there, we observe the entire scene unfolding. Holding her arms still, he simply pushes her back a bit. But now that she fell and was totally defeated, he feels happy knowing that now he finally survived the first stage. And for having defeated her, the system congratulates him for it. Now he finally reached the end. And for having done that, the final plot sort of happened. And because of that, the disappearance finally occurred. The process of the main dungeon for the beginner world was about to start. Looking at what was in front of him, he realizes this was already something new. But minutes later, in the blink of an eye, he ends up finding himself in a completely different place. However, in this same place where he was, it was a type of arena. Something begins to speak that everyone who entered here was welcome in this place. Now that everyone managed to pass the initial test, they will now be participating in some events. But before it could start, it wanted to introduce itself, so it asked everyone to simply call it the Rabbit Boss. For it would be an honor to basically guide everyone to a certain game, as it was assigned for such. But at this moment, it ends up saying that at 3 p.m. on September 30th, 2020, the test started happening. But with the help of participant Zing, it placed everyone in this place. In summary, it put the human species here, seemingly allowing them to gain new chances. Those who were selected have the chance to basically change everything, like change their destiny. However, to change everything, they need to participate in the event that will be happening here now. And now their time in the stars basically froze at this moment. Here now, they could remain trapped forever. You humans, who are more than 1 billion, were all selected. From now on, you can participate in events, but remember one thing, here inside, you can die. If you die, well, know where you'll end up. While saying all of this, someone ends up realizing that this all seemed more like nonsense to some islands. At the moment, the old man there, who no longer had time to give a cape, said, "What would I be doing here? I'm just an old man." But for that, the system ends up choosing him to basically return to the best phase of his life, the phase of youth. Also, those people with disabilities will basically receive some special treatment to walk again, or something like that. The global game will last only 1 year. Players can earn points, and with those points, players can enter other worlds to complete some tasks assigned by the system. At this moment, the system shows a table where it displays the players who can earn some points. These points can be used to upgrade their class. But since bad players, the bots, will be dying, they don't need to worry, because as soon as they die, they'll basically enter the world of the gods of the game. In the end, to summarize, those players who died inside the games will basically become spectators. After a certain time of viewing, you can basically reset all your previous strong points, restarting a global game. Also, those who are spectators might run the risk of writing some things. But there are also players who are already in the world. They basically have the option to activate live mode. By activating live mode, you can get some tips from players who were already defeated. But by activating live mode, you also earn some good rewards. Additionally, one thing the system tells us here is that Zhang Xing's time will remain frozen forever from the moment this begins. It will last until the end of this game. At this moment, before the rabbit could disappear, it says that weak players, the really bad ones with quite low points, will have that disadvantage. They will be eliminated. Now the players who know how to play will be receiving good things, like some points, that he can buy armor and other things after hearing all this. Some players don't believe it. Well, they should wake up. Maybe all of this they're living here is a nightmare. Some only think they'll become some kind of weapon for others. Est Zumban meets another who just thinks that now he might perhaps change his life, since opening a live broadcast was his interest too. At the same time, it would be perfect. Now, with all that said, he ends up kind of announcing some specific things about the novice level. The first novice level doesn't basically depend on any special accessory. It depends more on the individual's physical aptitude. On the physical stamina, they'll have a head against monsters or against people. In this exact location, there are several people, like an infinite number, but among this infinite number, only 527 people will be receiving a level evaluation. 17 people will be receiving an S-level evaluation. 1 person will be receiving the SS rank evaluation. Now, with that said, The rabbit wanted to call someone first to participate in the event he mentioned. Well, if they win, they get the SSS class. And then the first person to be chosen was our hero. But for some reason, after being chosen, he notices that the people around him didn't exactly realize that he was the first one chosen. Now that the first player has been chosen, he asks that this first player come forward and deliver a great speech to motivate everyone. And he didn't need to worry because this would be translated into various languages for people all over the world. And so, our hero begins to share everything he thinks about this game. But at this moment, he realizes that the script has ended up being slightly altered so that people don't have a specific impression of our protagonist right at the beginning. But he also continues to say that although it's somewhat ridiculous to link the fate of people around the world to just one game, he saw that there was nothing more he could do. He couldn't escape it. His destiny now was this: to fight against something that was coming. With that said, the system then appears in front of him, giving him some points for saying all of that in front of that massive crowd of people, like 10 billion. Now that he said all that, the evil rabbit ends up saying that yes, this person did indeed deserve to be the first to obtain the SS class. So that's it. He's said it all, explained everything. There's nothing more to be done. Now all the players here in this place will be participating in their first event in the first world. At the moment he talks about this, R raises his hand, and we can observe a dark shadow appearing over his paw or hand. And in the end, he only wishes one thing for these players: luck. Meanwhile, that smoke or whatever it is starts to engulf the people, and the system ends up kind of creating the same map for 50,000 people, where more than 20,000 will be thrown into this place. After a little while, our hero is thrown into a cell. There, the system says that they are now inside the apocalypse world. As soon as the game begins, he can use some points to buy skills or accessories. While our hero stays calm about this, another clings to the bars, screaming why he's in this place. He wanted to be at home. Meanwhile, from behind, he keeps thinking that there's no point in screaming. While another is thinking about what they should do since they don't know anything, another just wanted to learn the story of this game. Because without knowing the story, they can't do anything else. While one wanted to know the story, another was scared about everything that was happening. But looking to the side, our hero notices that in this room, including himself, there are 6 people in this place. So far, he realizes that perhaps the next event that will happen might be a team event. However, minutes later, the system appears, saying that now that our protagonist is in this world, he has managed to obtain the CS class. Now he can buy some things from the system, like skills, weapons, and some items. And at this moment, he receives 120 points. What he can do now is buy some good items from the system's shop. As soon as this is said, he ends up buying his first skill. This skill was the clone skill. At the moment, this skill was level 1 clone skill. And going forward, he realizes that the initial strength was very weak and doesn't understand the current environmental conditions. What he can do is try to improve combat power a little to increase it to 100 maybe, but he also needed new skills. So he went to the system for another skill. This skill cost 80 points. This skill, to him, would be the most perfect one he could have in his hands right now. He used this. He uses it where 20 points of his system end up being consumed. But also, by having used this, he ended up surpassing level 10 experience points. It was requested to pass, but he also ended up gaining new abilities. One of these extra abilities he gained now was a skill that allows him to have much greater resistance to mental attacks from other people. He now achieved a combat rating of 480 points, but while thinking about this, another kept wondering what he was thinking about life there. So he asked him to explain everything that was happening. To do so, he explains that, after an analysis, he realized he was in a prison. The door in front of him would never be opened, as his current level is not one that could easily break it, since his current combat power is 86. To break that gate, it would be necessary to have a much higher power level. Knowing that he cannot leave for now, he just asks the people in his group to get to know each other better because time is what they will have the most here going forward. He also knows this is a team battle, and he will have to be the first to act, as now that he considers himself the leader, he asks everyone to follow him. After saying this, a big guy stands by his side and says he has no brain and would follow as he wants. So he asks him to come up with a good strategy. He said he would do that, but looking ahead, he notices there was a guy in front of the cell. He asks him to go back, but nothing works, because our hero, with a simple magic move he learned just now with that hand, easily makes the lock that was holding the prison disappear. And after it completely disappeared, our hero easily pushes the door to the side, opening it. As soon as he opened that door, those two, let's say, the strongest comrades in the group, were left without a reaction, not understanding anything. How he managed to open that door, which for them, at the moment, seemed impossible to open. After opening it, he goes ahead where the system congratulates him for managing to reach the first world. This place is the historical story of Kigdong from the Dragon Kingdom. He receives a basic mission for all players: survive until the 15th day. They also receive an advanced mission for everyone to find antibodies to withstand a certain apocalypse that was coming. Moving forward, he found the door, but realized there were still some points to complete some tasks. Everything he is looking at seems very human. However, he also found a built-in backpack that has a 1 cubic meter space, and for some reason, he found 2 flashlights and put them inside. While thinking about what to do with his life, whether to go further or turn right at the corner, he ends up seeing a knife coming in his direction. He dodges it, but it's no use as he falls to the ground. The girl who was about to catch him ends up falling on top of our hero. But now that he was caught, he asks himself if she wanted to kill him. If she wanted to kill him, at least she should have been a bit smarter. With his ability, he can easily undo her sword before she can do anything. He only asks her to do something, let him explain what was happening. But nothing happens because right after, the television on the side suddenly turns on. Everyone in that place turns toward the TV, where, out of nowhere, we see a journalist saying there that a mysterious disease that hit the city of Hangang last year was completely eradicated and controlled this year. It was observed that a certain element from a mushroom product which controlled people had a generally positive effect on some rare diseases in the world. Now they use this mushroom to their advantage to cure difficult-to-treat diseases. The girl asks the protagonist to do something or leave the TV, but he asks her to wait a little longer, as he still wanted to gather some more information that would be helpful. The journalist then asks the people listening to avoid gathering too much and to take better care of their hygiene, urging them to trust the government. Now that everything was over, he gives her a lantern, knowing she was the first and only girl to follow him to this place. He thinks that maybe she isn't stupid, but she wonders if what he gave her is harmless. It was just enough to take, and she might need some weapons. Who knows what will happen to her or them next? After handing her the lantern, he moves forward. But at that moment, he encounters some items, a metal plate, some empty tubes, and other things that until now will not be the last of it. Moving on, he finds a warehouse on the track. Inside, there are some bottles with suspicious liquids. He decides to take a closer look to gather more information, but he doesn't need to touch anything since doing so might unlock or reveal what that thing is. To be 100% sure, he picks up where the system gives him some clues. The real clue there was that there were 8, meaning there were at least 8 tracks that could help him find a true lead to escape. Meanwhile, the girl who followed the hero looks around but doesn't find anything. Suddenly, she trips over something and the protagonist mocks her, thinking that if it weren't for him, she would have ended up on the ground. He also tells her to have a stronger mindset, or things will go bad for them. But she just asks him to leave her alone. He does so, and she says he is mean since she isn't the type to get scared easily. But at that moment, while holding the lantern, she points it towards something, her eyes reflecting something on the floor. Then she says she doesn't get scared easily, but screams loudly. The reason is that he found a corpse-like figure, transformed into a mushroom, lying on the ground. Looking at the mushroom, he realizes that the main subject must be a mushroom they don't yet know about. At that moment, the protagonist, as a curious and observant person, approaches the corpse, but then he sees it pushing forward. After everything, he reveals that something terrifying will happen. So, like a nice person, he asks the girl behind him to close her eyes as she will see something frightening, and it will be something quite sad for her. Then, the lantern she had gets turned off, but suddenly, as it turns off, she notices something suspicious coming towards the door. At that moment, she calls out to the hero. But nothing happens. But minutes later, she notices something happening in front of her, like someone with a childlike appearance. I will consider it a ghost. It asks the girl in front of her if she, by any chance, likes picking mushrooms before something bad might happen. Our protagonist in the background ends up turning the lights back on. After this happens, she wonders what that was. He barely knows what's going on, but it seems like the light switch is the condition for rationing the break. So he asks her to leave through that door. In front of this door, she opens it. Minutes later, she realizes she is afraid of things like ghosts and monsters. But even so, she is now still confident that she can handle herself well in future fights. Now, finally, she may be leaving, letting go of the infernal. But before leaving, something appears in front of her, a type of friendship request that was activated. But our protagonist, instead of following her, goes another way. This leaves her confused, and she wonders where he would be going. He simply answers that he will be investigating some things that still need to be investigated. So he looks for quite useful and furious information, but out of nowhere the girl says that he has already saved her a lot, and in return she is offering help for him to at least repay all the favor. Well, our protagonist doesn't know what to do with her anymore. Let me know if you'd like any adjustments.